Hey, I'm Warren Sprouse. You're on the Bible Forum. It's February 25, and we're going to look at the events that were behind our life, behind the headlines this week. There's an untold story, the story of Christian persecution. Thousands of Christians are being butchered in Nigeria. Whole villages are being destroyed, and the world doesn't seem to care. Have you heard anything about it? We don't know what's happening there. For the last several months, Fulani tribesmen have been raping and killing villagers. Children being used as Islamic suicide bombers, resulting in scores of casualties. One horrible report after another. For the last several months, a Christian missionary serving in the poorest of the poor in Nigeria has been sending out emails with terrifying news. In addition to the raping and the killing of villagers, children are being used as suicide bombers. They're having ammunition, bombs, whatever, strapped to them. Yet the major news agencies in the West appear to be ignoring the whole thing, despite Nigerian news sources ablaze with reports of the latest atrocities. This is just another inconvenient truth. Our president, President Trump, announced this week that the Treasury Department will take action to, quote, further cut off sources of revenue that fuel the North Korean regime. North Korea uses these sources to further its nuclear program and sustain its military by targeting 56 vessels, shipping companies, and trade businesses that are assisting North Korea in evading the sanctions. In the last 24 or 36 hours, the North Korean regime has announced that these sanctions are an act of war. We've been watching the events unfold relative to the Parkland school shooting in Florida. One person says, when we declare our schools to be gun-free zones, it just puts our students in more danger. Well-trained, gun-adept teachers and coaches should be able to carry concealed firearms. Another person says we should do what works, which includes common sense measures that will protect the rights of law-abiding Americans while helping to keep guns out of the hands of those who pose a danger to themselves and to others. Statements like that and many others are just too much common sense for the liberal crowd. We're going to come back and talk about this a little bit more involved later on in the show. Remember the Republican memo that was released in order to inform the public about the Justice Department's effort to spy on an American citizen using the FISA court to issue a warrant, a court that apparently did not have all the information, and how the Democrats crafted their 11-page memo, which the White House refused to release, pointing the Democrats back to the drawing board to eliminate the sensitive parts, the parts that should not be told. The FBI and the Justice Department said it contained sensitive material that needed to be redacted, while the Democrats insisted officials at the FBI and Justice Department did not abuse the Foreign Intelligence Service Act, that's FISA, process by omitting material information. Well, it's back. The House Intelligence Committee released the memo yesterday, the Democrats' version. The White House called the rebuttal a, quote, politically driven document that fails to answer the concerns raised by the Republican memo. It went on to say, as the majority's memorandum stated, the FISA judge was never informed that Hillary Clinton and the DNC funded the dossier that was basis for the Department of Justice's FISA application. In addition, the minority's memo fails to even address the fact that the FBI, or the deputy FBI director, told the committee that had it not been for the dossier, no surveillance order would have been sought. A Republican source dismissed the rebuttal, saying that the Democrats, quote, want the public to look at the trees and not the forest. That being the big picture, the DOJ and Justice relied heavily on the dossier to surveil an American citizen and withheld from the court that the research was funded by the DNC and the Clinton campaign. And we're off again. This is all about midterm elections, and we will hear more about all of this as this week begins to unfold. Under the heading of I Told You So, Democrat Senator Dick Durbin is banned from receiving communion by the Bishop of Durban's Catholic Diocese in Springfield, Illinois. He will be banned from communion until the senator, quote, repents of his pro-abortion sin. Bishop Thomas John Paprocki noted in a February 13 news release that Durbin's longtime voting record in support of abortion constitutes, quote, obstinate persistence in manifest grave sin, end of quote. Therefore, the bishop declared the senator is not to be admitted to Holy Communion until he repents of this sin. Now, you might think that that's just posturing, but then you wouldn't be a Catholic. The Catholic Church's Code of Canon Law states that those who, quote, obstinately persist in manifest grave sin are not to be admitted to Holy Communion. Canon 9:15. So how did Roman Catholic Senator Durbin respond? He responded with no reply. What does that mean? It means Senator Durbin cannot receive forgiveness for his sin. Any of them. In Roman Catholic law, forgiveness occurs only when the penitent confesses their sin to a priest and then receives Holy Communion. There are exceptions, but Senator Durbin is not dying. Not yet. The exception is for something they call perfect contrition. And that standard is set very, very high. Now, you do see this, right? Without communion, in and by a Catholic priest, no one has their sins forgiven, which is another way of saying you're not getting to heaven. They will argue the exceptions, but the exceptional standards are set very, very high. They're not the normative, meaning Roman Catholicism, in fact, all the Catholic groups, preach a works righteousness system. Catholicism is not a faith. It's a works righteousness system. Look at all you have to do. It isn't just simple belief. And here's proof. Here's another indication that hindsight is always 20/20. It's now obvious that the Obama administration knew, or should have known, that the Russians were seeking to influence our 2016 election. They did or did not do what the law and common sense dictates when foreign governments interfere in this way. Instead, they chose to blame the Republican candidate. The candidate, by the way, who won the election anyway. We're learning now that millions of tweets and Facebook comments and other things were false, being generated by bots, not human beings, to the tune of millions of dollars and presented as actual voter opinion. What does that mean in terms of news reporting as we go forward? Cynical as I am, my answer would be, not much. They'll keep doing it. Olympic figure skater Adam Rippon has stayed in the headlines for the past month for his repeated attacks on Vice President Mike Pence. Rippon routinely bashes the vice president for his Christian view of gay marriage. Rippon is the first openly gay Olympian. And now the bronze medal winner is in the headlines again because NBC hired him as an Olympic correspondent. What happened? According to USA Today, NBC announced the hire last Sunday. Rippon will serve as a correspondent for the remainder of the Olympic Games in South Korea. NBC spokesman Greg Hughes told USA Today Rippon will do work for TV, digital, and social media. There's a message in there. Here's an article I've entitled Only in America. One day you find that the facade of your beautiful dwelling has been defaced by graffiti. Now, the graffiti is by a renowned artist whose paintings are considered art treasures by the so-called experts. But because it's your property and you weren't asked your opinion, you don't hesitate for a second and you immediately start cleaning the front of your house. But a few days later, you find out you've been sued for breaking a law that protects public art of recognized stature. You are finally condemned to pay a large fine to the artist for erasing his work of art. Now, if you're thinking this could never happen in the United States, where private property rights are allegedly protected by the Fifth Amendment, you are wrong. Last week, the New York Times reported that a real estate developer had been condemned to pay $6.7 million for whitewashing his property back in 2013. There were dozens of artistic murals on the walls of his buildings. He was not asked, he was not paid for it. But apparently some of these murals were under the protection of the Visual Artists' Rights Act for their recognized artistic stature. Be careful.